Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Thank you all for joining us. My name is Jared Maynard, and I'm the webinar director here at Clinical Athlete. I want to thank you all for setting aside some time in your day, whether you're joining us live or you're watching this after the fact. So I'm personally very excited for this webinar. This has been a little bit in the making. I think you're all going to find this to be highly entertaining and probably even more educational. So before we get into the good stuff, some housekeeping items. And if you're not familiar with Clinical Athlete, we're a network of healthcare providers, students, and coaches who specialize in the management of athletes. You can find your nearest clinical athlete provider on clinicalathlete.com. We also have a Clinical Athlete forum where clinicians, students, and coaches network, discuss, and share ideas and resources related to sports medicine, rehabilitation, and performance. To join the forum, for potential listing on the Clinical Athlete directory, and for details on all Clinical Athlete events, seminars, courses, webinars, and so forth, details can be found on clinicalathlete.com. A few more housekeeping items. The question and answer portion of the webinar will be saved until the end, but you can type your questions in your GoToWebinar control panel under the questions tab. We encourage that as the presentation is going, just so we have a bank of questions ready to ask Dr. Mike when we get to the Q&A section. Please let us know if there are any audio or visual issues of any kind by using the chat tab of your control panel. And this webinar is being recorded and will be sent to you within 5 business days following tonight's live event, so please hold all inquiries until then. So the title of this webinar is The Comeback Plan, Organizing Your Post-Injury Weight Training, and is being presented by Dr. Mike Israetel, who holds his PhD in Sport Physiology and is the head science consultant for Renaissance Periodization. We're very excited to learn from Dr. Mike, and without further ado, we'll let him take it away.
Awesome, thank you so much. If my audio is good, say nothing. Okay, great. Folks, thank you so much for having me on. Thanks so much for the Clinical Athlete guys to have me on. I'm not exactly sure how my charlatanism got me this far in the industry, but by God, the University of Phoenix online PhD that I have has done me well. So I completely made up the following presentation, knowing nothing at all about sport or science, but maybe we can all have fun together and pretend to learn something. So the comeback plan, without further ado, and here we go. So today, what it is are we going to talk about? First is the purpose of this presentation, which we'll get to in just a bit, to make sure we sort of have our goals and our mindset set properly to get the most out of it that we can. We're going to identify the problem, and there is a big problem called injury. So we'll talk about what exactly that entails and how predictable that really is that it would occur to anyone during their career. We're going to talk about the timescales of injury recovery. So how long does a typical injury that is of note take to actually recover from? Because how long it takes to recover from is going to be a real big input onto what kind of solutions we're going to have for the problem. We're going to do an example throughout the entire talk. It's kind of going to be our central example. And we're just going to use a quadriceps tear that, let's say, occurred during squatting. And we're going to say that surgery was done. And then we're going to go through the 4 phases of the comeback process. And we're going to talk about much more depth what they are. The first phase is called fundamental rehab. Then it's low load ROM training, conventional volume buildup, and something called intensifications to eights. These are 4 phases. They're actually brutally simple, but there's some nuances there to talk about them. And then we're going to finish off as to when you can get into unrestricted training after a really big injury, summarize, and take some implications away. So, what is the purpose of this presentation? First is to outline the goal for injury comebacks. Hint, it's not to come back as fast as possible. It is to come back as fast as possible with full healing so you can go on and hit PRs and not worry about anything towards the end of your career. Very, very productive comeback as opposed to just a comeback. To that end, we are trying to set up a situation in which you help avoid setting yourself back like crazy by re-injuring yourself, which happens all the damn time. As a matter of fact, I made this presentation, or the sort of theoretical underpinnings, one time when I got super frustrated seeing a bunch of lifters that I liked and respected go through the same stupidity in coming back from an injury. And by the way, in case I don't mention this, these principles apply to all sports, but we're going to be focusing on lifting, not necessarily powerlifting. This could be weightlifting too. Powerlifting will sort of be the example, the squat, because it's the simplest. right? And this gets a little bit more complicated with other sports, but not by much. So if you guys have questions of how do I apply this to other sports, a lot of those will be answered just in the presentation. But if they go unanswered, by all means, in the Q&A afterwards, type that question in, and we'll get that answered, no problem, because it does apply to all sports. But we're using lifting as just sort of simple common denominator example. Big part of this is to give you a logical post-injury training sequence, which means that after you get hurt, maybe after you do your rehab, a lot of times medical professionals, not the folks at the clinical athlete, but unfortunately their inferior counterparts, will say, all right, you're good to go. You're just good to go train sport. And you're like, okay, but my sport involves me squatting 400 pounds. And they're like, yeah, I mean, your quad's healed or whatever, so go do that, go back, start light or something. And they have no idea what they're talking about. They're not trained in this whatsoever. And then you look to your gym bros and they don't know what the hell's going on. So like, how you feeling? You're like, pretty good. They're like, oh, you should do a 1 RM attempt to see how weak you got, which is, as we'll discuss, completely pointless and incredibly risky. So this presentation will give you a logical, surprise, post-injury training sequence so that if you unfortunately get injured, and if you train hard, eventually you will, you're going to never be in the situation where you're like, oh my God, what do I do? This is really bad. You're gonna get hurt. You're gonna look around. You're gonna say, you know what? I know what to do from here. I know what to do with rehab. I know what to do after rehab. I know how to come back. Really good stuff. So what's the fundamental problem here? Well, here's the deal. Everybody will get hurt at some point, period, right? With hard training. If you never get hurt in your entire career, you're either the luckiest son of a bitch ever lived, or you have tendons of steel or something, again, luck, or you never really trained hard. Now, do you have to do the Iron Brotherhood, like, I fucking tore my body into shreds, brother, I earned my fucking stripes? No. But just on just sort of, a bad day, bad confluence of events, all of us will be hurt, at least minor injuries. Most people will have a couple of major injuries through their training career. And unless you play table tennis or something like that, no disrespect, it's a great sport. If you play a hard sport, you're going to have gnarly injuries. It's just almost certainly going to happen. So that's the sort of big downside, so to speak. All right. Now, the degree of your injury could be variable, but you might get hurt pretty seriously. And you're certainly going to be around some people that get hurt pretty seriously. And once you get hurt, a lot of us have been to this place where we got hurt and shit kind of just seems hopeless. Like, I used to be the super strong person, the super awesome athlete, and now I'm broken. I can barely even get out of bed. Apparently I need surgery, which is going to just debilitate me even more. And what the hell am I supposed to do now, right? To quote Lieutenant Dan from Forrest Gump, what am I going to do now? Right now, he was talking about Vietnam War shit, but you guys know what I'm saying, right? Super politically incorrect, ridiculous, not even funny joke. Number one of this presentation. So how you plan your training after the injury is a really big deal, because you're left over here, you're hurt pretty seriously, and you're like, damn it, what do I do? I'm fucking useless. And then some kind of spark hits your ass, and you go, oh shit, I can come back. I can train. We're going to build him bigger, faster, stronger, $1 million man type of shit. Totally. That's not wrong. But how you go about doing this is a really big deal, because you got sort of one of two ways to go. You can come back with heavy singles and triples, right? And nearly guarantee yourself re-injury or incomplete healing and or permanent dysfunction, right? You say, yeah, just worked up to a heavy triple. The first question is why? It's really interesting that all of you probably listening now are relatively logical individuals. A lot of people have these ideas that are just harebrained is a real good term for them. They will get some kind of setback, especially an injury, and they know that heavy training is very risky at that point, and they'll take these huge risks to do a triple or a single, and you go, why did you do that? Why did you max out after getting hurt just weeks later? And they'll say, well, I was trying to get a gauge of where I'm at. Hey, dickhole, why the fuck does that matter? Are you out of your mind? Why couldn't you do sets of 10 or 20 or something, some rehab, something light, something that builds muscle, something that heals the injury? We'll get to all the specifics in a second. You're going to have to do that anyway, and that stuff's going to build muscle. Eventually, it's going to build strength. What do you mean I had to find out where it was? It's pure ego bullshit. It's just people miss heavy lifting, And I don't even know what they want out of it. The thing is, they don't know what they want out of it. Really, really, really bad idea. The thing is, when you're already hurt and your tendons and whatever you ripped, your muscles are weakened, going super heavy very soon is the problem. So what's the problem? That's the problem, right? And like we mentioned earlier, even some doctors will just be like, yeah, you're cleared for your sport, right? Does that mean 1RMs? I mean, my sport is powerlifting, it's weightlifting, it's Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Does that mean I just go in and start getting armbarred the next day after bicep tendon reattachment? Probably not, right? And some doctors will say, or some rehab people will be like, oh, you're cleared for sport, you're good to go. And then you sometimes inquire with them about, well, what does that mean? And that's when you get real scared because they have no idea. They're like, well, you know, like just to sort of take it easy and sort of ease in. And you're like, what do you mean ease in? Like, does that mean sets of 10 with 400 pounds, or it's anything short of a single, you know, or does it mean, you know, start walking up a flight of stairs by yourself without a fucking cane? Who knows, right? So you can do this where you do like heavy singles and triples and fuck your shit up much worse, or you can be patient, right, which is a huge, huge sort of underlying theme in this talk, and come back with no needless complications at all and come back stronger. I'm going to paint this clear of a picture as I can for you guys before we sort of get going on the actual meat and potatoes of the presentation. After you get hurt, unless it's like a full pec rupture, in which case you're probably never benching properly after that ever again, most, even major injuries, there is a spectrum of things that you can come back to, but the spectrum has two ends. One is, let's say, assuming you try to come back. One is you do it the worst fucking way possible. You do way too much volume and intensity, especially intensity up front. You re-injure the area, if not once, if not twice, if not 3 times. You give yourself a ton of scar tissue, a ton of irreparable damage, and you never squat properly ever again. You never reach your max weights ever again. That's on the one side. And you basically sort of just disappear from the sport or kind of just wish you had done things better. On the other side, there is a way to do this, which I will describe, which gives you every bit of chance to come back not even remembering in some sense that you got injured. You're remembering in an intuitive sort of guttural sense, right? You're gonna squat like a free fucking bird. We're gonna open up your cage, you're gonna flap in the fucking wind and fly to Brazil, or whatever the fuck birds do when you let them go. It's gonna be, you know, because after you get hurt, whatever movement you're doing, you know that feeling. A lot of you have been there of, oh boy, here we go, heavier sort of weight. I don't know, things feel weird. Oh, I didn't die. That feeling is gnarly, and especially on competition day for weightlifting, powerlifting, MMA, whatever sport you do, you know, basketball, football, doesn't matter. You can't have that feeling in the back of your mind and do your best performance, because it's always going to stop you from your best performance, because that's what that feeling is designed to do, is stop you from ripping yourself into pieces. The thing is, if you do this properly, you can come back not only emotionally and mentally, knowing that you're completely healed and not worrying about a fucking thing, and you can come back literally stronger in the tissue sense, that your chances of getting hurt are lower than when you started. It is possible, but it requires a whole lot of patience and some organization, nothing too crazy. And here's the really big problem. Most people mess it up. The number of people, the fraction of people in the sport of powerlifting, weightlifting, you name it, that actually come back from injuries properly is relatively low. It's not crazy low, maybe like 25%, but that means 75% of people fuck up to some degree. Probably 25%, or a third of those 75%, fuck up to a ridiculous degree, to the point where they preclude any sort of success whatsoever, and essentially just kind of low IQ their way out of the sport. Like, everything's going great, they're getting stronger, they get really hurt, and it's almost like God's like, here's a test of how fucking not an idiot you are, and they're like, oh, I gotta fail the shit out of this one, and they sure as hell do. So point number one, don't be that person. Here's how not to be that person. First piece of knowledge. How long does injury recovery take? You know, about 2 days. If you rupture your pec, you're pretty good to go. JK. So here's the deal. The initial pain of the actual tear, clearly it begins onset instantly, but it can actually take hours to express itself fully, right? Because, you know, you fuck your shit up, your tendon retracts, you know, and your muscle retracts way up into your leg, for example. We'll start using the squat analogy or the quad tear now, even though I'll explain exactly what I'm talking about in a bit. And it actually fucks up a bunch of shit on its way in, and that shit gets fucked up. So like you guys like the technical terminology we're using today. You do a considerable amount of various tissue damage, not only by the injury itself, but the sort of after effects of the injury, and thus that can cause pain for hours, right? And usually you go ahead and get some pain meds at some point. You know, walking around with missing quad, you probably walk your dumb ass to the hospital and get some pain meds. And here we get the post-injury large-scale inflammation. If you've ever seen a really nasty injury, the inflammation could look way worse than the injury itself. Like right after you tear your quad, it kind of doesn't look like anything. It maybe look like you have a lump in your thigh. You're like, I don't know, it doesn't look terrible. A couple days later, your knee is like the size of a basketball, like real gnarly stuff. And a lot of that inflammation can do some secondary damage, can definitely cause a ton of pain, but in some sense, that inflammation is to an extent good because it already is starting the healing process. Until and unless you need surgery, right? Surgery is for shit that doesn't heal on its own. Quad tendons heal real well if they're actually attached, right? If your quad tendon is off of your patella or your entire patella is fucking retracted into the top of your quad, then there's nothing to connect to, and healing is sort of impossible in the geometrical sense. Right? So a lot of times, or sometimes, if a tear is complete, then you'll do surgery. We're going to talk about how to recover from surgery because, listen, anything less just takes less of an intervention. So everything I say will be true for the worst case, which is post-surgical recovery, but some of the stuff I say just won't apply as much if it's not surgery. So basically, we're going to describe kind of the worst case scenario injury, and the good news is if you know how to deal with the worst case, dealing with the not as worst case is going to be super easy. The thing is, post-surgical inflammation, you get surgery, right? The post-surgical inflammation, because here's the deal, surgery comes with its own inflammation, right? So if you're inflamed after the tear, if you wait maybe a week or so to get surgery, your inflammation could actually start to go down. You're like, it doesn't feel that bad. It feels kind of weird in there. It's clearly nothing's pulling on my knee. I can't really fucking walk normally, but I guess it's not as much pain as it used to be. It's not as much inflammation. Well, it's going to be a fucking short time because as soon as you get surgery, you're going to wake up inflamed as all fucking hell. And that inflammation lasts a long time, in part because surgery literally goes in there, opens up a bunch of shit like your skin, pulls some shit around. If, just a word to the wise, and I'm sure all the clinical athlete guys, it's too late for them because they've seen a bunch of these surgeries up close. Don't watch the video of your surgery that you're scheduled for before you go get it. I had an umbilical hernia back in my master's program, and I tried to watch the surgery before I got it. Like I went to YouTube and got a video of umbilical surgery repair. I just saw a guy with like a fucking, what looked like a window cleaner, like a squeegee, and he had like a fucking hammer at the end of it, and he was hammering it and like pulling the belly button off the skin. And I was like, oh my God, fuck that. It's super disturbing. Surgery is really disruptive, so it causes its own inflammation, which takes weeks to come down, right? So all of, thoughts about lifting hard at any point in this process are insane thoughts. And the good news is most people don't try to go hard or heavy during this time. But during the point number 3, post-surgical inflammation, towards the middle or end of that, some people are stupid enough to try to lift. Now, we got once the post-surgical inflammation heals, it takes weeks, let's say about a month out from a pretty nasty injury, you have sort of dealing with chronic post-injury inflammation, and you'll know it's chronic inflammation when it sort of goes down by a lot the first time after a few weeks, and then based on various activities, or sometimes just based on random chance, it seems, inflammation will come back to some extent and it will recede. It will come back to some extent and it will recede, and that's how you know you're dealing with sort of chronic post-injury inflammation. It's got its good days and its bad days. It's almost never as bad as immediate post-injury inflammation, but it's still pretty nasty, and it definitely presents some challenges in the recovery process. It is part of the recovery process. It presents some challenges to the training process, so on and so forth. In part due to this inflammation and the scar tissue and some other related concerns, you'll get a range of motion limitation, which can definitely be a really nasty thing, is how do you work around that in training, so on and so forth. But of course, it's a sort of a life-altering thing because your fucking leg doesn't work like it's supposed to. And of course, you'll exhibit tissue weakness. The tissue weakness comes from 2 primary areas, or 2 primary vectors. Vector number 1 is the nervous system knows you're fucked up. Golgi tendon organs, so on and so forth, tell you do not fucking contract your quad as hard as you could because you'll just injure it again. And the other one is you exhibit some pretty good atrophy of the muscle when it gets torn and when it's in disuse for weeks. And then the tissue weakness is both because your quad shrank or your tissue shrank, and because it's injured, and it's good that your nervous system won't let you contract it as hard as possible. Now, this post-injury state can last for weeks if the injury is not terrible, or months if the injury is really, really bad. We're just going to have to deal with it, and don't worry, we've got a plan to do that. After that, we enter another phase. And you'll notice that sort of these phases line up with the phases of intervention we're going to be talking about later. This next phase is you basically have incomplete structural integrity of healing tissues. Like your tissues are really getting to be healed, but they're not completely healed. And oh, look, I misspelled strength. You have a decreased size and strength of local musculature, and that lasts again for months. Notice, decreased size and strength of local musculature lasts for months. If we already know that, why the fuck would we test our 3RM or 1RM when we know it's fucked up? Right? And also, just to pick on that position a bit more, if you lost a lot of strength, what do you do differently versus if you don't lose a lot of strength? You still fucking train either way. It's just a matter of setting your percent 1RM, which you don't even need to set, and we'll talk about that in a bit. So here's the thing. This phase right here, the incomplete structural integrity of healing tissues, this is probably the most dangerous phase. Statistically. Why? Clearly the post-surgical inflammation or the pre-surgery. I mean, you lift during pre-surgery, you're probably not even doing any more damage because the shit's already off the bone. Right post-surgically is probably the worst time to lift because your shit could just snap off. The chronic post-surgery, if you like go too hard too soon, you could get a lucky break and be fine, but you're definitely, there's just shit is really, really not that solid. You get into a really nasty inflammatory cycle if you lift too soon. That's really bad news. But most people don't do that because their shit is clearly still fucked up. Like your quad's double the size that it used to be, and you feel super weak. If you're not completely insane, you probably won't go to the gym and squat your max. Some people do. Most people don't. But here's the thing. Here's where most people fall prey. When they get towards the middle or tail end of this incomplete healing phase, this next phase, and they kind of feel better. Their quad range of motion, notice there's no more ROM limitation in this phase, so your range of motion's back. You're feeling your swag a little bit, and you're not as strong. So there's this kind of psychological pull to be like, okay, I'm no longer feeling pain. Notice there's no mention of pain here or inflammation. I feel like shit kind of works in there, but I'm fucking weak and my quad is small. I got to do something about it. Time to go heavy and fix the shit. That is when a lot of re-injuring happens, is precisely during this sort of 70 to 95% healed phase where you feel good enough to go fuck yourself up, but you're not actually structurally good enough to get fucked up, and that can lead to, if not a full re-tear, partial re-tearing, inflammation. What you basically do, in essence, is if you really screw yourself over, you go back to point 2 post-injury, right? Or really just a re-injury. If you fuck yourself up just a bit, you could go back to this chronic post-injury inflammation state. You don't want to be in this again, because the more times you go through this, the more scar tissue buildup there is, the less chance there is for complete healing. And of course, the last phase is complete recovery, including scar tissue settling in, right? Because scar tissue will form all over the place, and then when you do your full range of motion lifting, so on and so forth, it'll start to degrade over time, and sometimes it pulls off in the middle of a lift. This has happened to me through a variety of injuries. It's like, oh my God, fuck, I think I fucking tore my shit again. I was like, well, works fine and there's no pain. Weird, what the hell was that? Well, scar tissue comes apart. It's supposed to, it's not supposed to stay there forever. Notice if you load a shitload of it in through too much of this chronic inflammation, you're gonna be dealing with a whole lot of this bullshit later. But complete recovery is when basically all the scar tissue settles in. It's not sort of in a place where it gets pulled apart anymore, or that stuff gets pulled apart, and then you're good to go. That takes months in not so gnarly but still serious injuries. Notice this isn't like, muscle aches or low pulls, to a year plus. The injury we're going to talk about takes a year plus to recover from in many instances. So big question, how the hell are we going to go heavy again a month later? Well, the answer is that's really stupid. I think we already kind of figured that out. So here's our example that we're going to go through with the 4 phases of recovery. Quad tear with surgery. So we're going to go through this injury example, and we're going to find out how to do proper recovery and how to implement a proper weight training plan. We're going to pick the super fucking gnarly injury. And the thing is, like I mentioned earlier, most others have shorter processes, very similar processes, just not as long. So sometimes they're even simpler processes. So if you know how to recover from like a full quad tear, everything else is sort of downstream of that. It's much easier, right? So our quad tear specifically would be a distal rupture of patellar tendon during competition squat. It means your patellar tendon just comes off and your whole shit slides up into your quad. People gasp. The lady at the front faints and tears her own quad, and just that's how the world works, right? Just fate, right? And really, really bad news. You're not completely ridiculous, so you go and you have a surgery that is successful, right? So that means when you wake up, the doctor's like, hey man, we lost your leg. I'm just kidding. We did just fine. You know, that's why I'm not a medical doctor. I would totally do shit like that if I was a surgeon. I'd be like, dude, the good news is your quad got reattached. The bad news is we accidentally have an intern. He cut your dick off. Or you can't feel it yet, but your dick's just not there. I wouldn't look because it'll really fuck you up. You probably don't ever want to see that. So JK, but let's say you didn't get your dick cut off. Your surgery is successful, and you got your surgery 1 week post-injury. Why 1 week? Well, depending on certain time scales, getting a surgery way later after injury is really bad news. Really, prognosis for recovery is not good. But if you get it relatively soon, you can get full reattachment of the tendon. And sometimes they do tendon grafts, sometimes they don't. But basically, you're pretty well set up to have a potentially full recovery. Right? Potentially set up. It's not guaranteed if you fuck your shit up. So now what do? You know, the hospital says you can't stay here anymore and eat our Jello, so you got to leave and you go home and that one, right? Well, now you enter the 4 phases of the comeback process. Let's get into them. Fundamental rehab phase, low load, ROM training, we'll talk about what the hell that is, conventional volume buildup, and intensification. Dates. How in God's name do we apply this? Let's find out. So phase 1, post-surgery, fundamental rehab. What the hell is that? Well, this is actually outside my wheelhouse, so I'll spin through this. And this is what clinical athlete folks are actually for. So what's the reality? And in all these phases, we'll deal with the physiological reality that's presented to us at the beginning of these phases. Physiological reality is that you're very, very damaged post-injury and or surgery, right? So it's the injury and the surgery that both fucked you up. And you cannot do any overloading training, misspelled. Jesus, what the fuck was I doing when I wrote this? Hey, thanks, spell check, for catching that one. Can't do overloading training of any kind. Period. Because the very definition of overload is to push yourself within the boundaries of adaptation, within the boundaries of your system's ability to tolerate stress. If you go there post-surgery, you're just going to rip your shit completely into pieces. So we cannot do any overloaded training of any kind. So then what the hell is the goal of this phase? Because it is a training phase. The goal of this phase is to provide healing, right? Assistance, healing help to local structures. And you're going to do this by pushing blood through the area, expanding the range of motion, letting scar tissue settle, and so on and so forth. There must be a term for this, right? It's called rehab. That's it. So the modalities and methods are traditional rehab, bands, machines, proprioceptive exercises, so on and so forth. Everything clinicians actually do in a rehab clinic, or the exercises they tell you to do at home on your own damn time. Because just like with the hospital and the Jello, you can't hang out at the rehab clinic after hours. Right? So when can you move on from this phase? Because this is going to take a while. When can we say that phase 1 is over and we're ready for the next phase, right? Well, the big thing is when we can use the limb relatively normally in day-to-day life, okay? You are not ready for any kind of what we would call training until you can fucking walk, okay? Nothing in the gym with barbells and dumbbells until you can walk on your fucking leg. Or if it's your bicep or your pec or something, reach for objects, so on and so forth. This usually takes a month or more. It can take a lot longer depending on the nature of the rehab and how your surgery went, but it's almost certainly going to be at least a month. So my first sort of public service announcement here is do your rehab. I have a lot of folks coming to me on Facebook because, you guys know me. I'm a famous guy. I have, a lot of fans. And a lot of times they tell me, listen, Mike, you're great. And I say, no. And they say, no, really, you're amazing. And I'm like, I know. But in any case, when I'm not pretending that anyone actually likes me, folks will message me and be like, hey, listen, so I'm slated to do surgery in a week. What do I do after? My first perennial advice to them is you do exactly what your PT tells you. You do what your rehab specialist tells you and full finish the rehab. Because if you fuck up, because there's 9 times out of 10, powerlifters and weightlifters will be like, I'm feeling pretty good now, week and a half into the 4-week rehab, and I'm just going to go do shit on my own. Like, he's having me do squats or whatever, I can do my own squats. I know how this works. Sure enough, 6 weeks later, they're back like, oh man, I don't know, I woke up and the shit's really swollen. I don't know what's going on. Like, I'm in a lot of pain. Like, oh, how was rehab? Like, well, yeah. I didn't realize I was bad. I thought I could do it. These people get fucking degrees and doctorates for a living. Okay, so listen to what they're doing. All of this, all the other phases are straight up non-negotiable until you finish your traditional rehab. And the rehab people say, hey, you're good to go for everyday life. Remember, unless you get someone who's in the Clinical Athlete Network, which I highly recommend, they don't kind of know dick about super hard training, right? What they're designed to rehab you for is day-to-day life. When you're done rehabbing for day-to-day life, that's when we say, well, you can use the limb relatively normally in day-to-day life. That's when you're cleared by most rehab professionals, right? When you're cleared, then you can enter phase 2. But unless you can say you're really cleared by your rehab person, you're not ready for phase 2. Phase 2. Phase 2 sounds like a fucking rap album. Like, you're not ready for phase 2, motherfuckers. Shit is coming out late October. Get it in stores. DJ Dr. Mike, you know, Renaissance Records. Ooh, that actually sounds pretty good. I'll probably do that, guys. I'll probably release a rap album soon. So phase 2 is low load ROM training. That is not abbreviation for name. It is range of motion training. So what's the reality we're dealing with? Here's the deal. It's not a bad reality. It's a little better. Physiological reality is that we can use the injured muscle in most daily tasks and mostly without pain. That's really good. And certainly not like, oh, fuck, pain. You know, there's like, oh, I feel like it's just kind of cracking in there, I feel a little bit of a pull, versus like, there is a stabbing in my quad, something is wrong, something feels broken, right? Not the latter, but even if we have a little bit of the former pain, it's probably good to go and we can use it in daily tasks, right? So TLDR, if you can't get up out of your car and walk to the store, get your groceries and come back, you're not ready for phase 2, right? But when you are, when you're done with rehab, what are we doing with this phase? The goal here is to begin to hypertrophy the atrophy tissues, because by then, look, check it out. You didn't train your quad the whole week post-surgery, I hope, or sorry, pre-surgery. You sure as hell didn't train it post-surgery. You sure as hell didn't train in any meaningful way that's going to get you jacked during rehab. Right? Rehab is mostly about range of motion expansion and sort of letting the healing process take place versus getting you fucking jacked. So you've lost probably a considerable amount of muscle size and a considerable amount of strength, right? And so the goal of this phase is to begin to build up your muscle and to expand your range of motion, which is going to set you up for even more muscle building and strength building later. Notice what is not the goal of the phase. The goal of the phase is not to make your muscles stronger. Your tendons have to be fully healed before we can really start to add strength. First, we're adding size. We're adding size because that's going to set up our strength later. Now, ideally, would we want to enhance our strength? Yeah, fuck yeah, but our tendons aren't ready for that. Our connective tissue is not, because you fucking just tore them shits, right? So we're just gonna start to put on a little muscle size and expand our range of motion. How do we do this? Well, a real good play at this point is to use occlusion training. So you use occlusion training because occlusion training can, by blood flow occlusion, make weights that are usually not heavy enough to cause hypertrophy, all of a sudden able to cause hypertrophy. So we don't have to load the tendons very much, almost at all. And what ends up happening is we still get muscle hypertrophy because we're not loading the tendons. The risk of re-injury is tiny, sort of non-existent, and all is well, super, super good, right? So we can use occlusion. Now, do we have to? Not necessarily. It's a really good tool, especially for something like the quads. But we can definitely do high repetition training even with occlusion. And we really mean like 30-ish reps, okay? And that's real low. Because lightweight, folks, does not mean, I know powerlifters, weightlifters, lightweight means sets of 10. Sets of 10 will fuck you in the ass big time at this point of the process. It'll just tear your shit right up. So it's high repetition training, 30-ish reps, right? And here's the deal. Because we can't push it too hard, and because trying really hard is pushing it hard, we actually want to stay 4 reps shy of failure at this point. That's bullshit. 30 reps, 4 reps shy of failure, that's not very hard training, totally, because we're just coming back. We want to give the muscles very, very low input at this point, just the absolute bare minimum that's going to make them grow. Hey, good news, that's barely fucking anything, because you've been out of fucking training so much, you're damn near anything will get you to grow. It's kind of a good time because you'll be doing this super easy training and growing like crazy. At first, you want your volume to be very low and your frequency to be very low. Because again, we're not trying to overextend our recovery capabilities, because you're not just normally recovering, you're recovering from a massive disruption, surgery, so on and so forth, and your normal recovery. And you're not used to hardly any volume. You're basically a beginner again in that quad. So what you do is low volume. What does that mean? Let me get to some specifics here. Low volume means the first time you train your quad after surgery, you do 30 leg extensions, 4 reps away from failure, for 1 set, period. And then you go the fuck home. And then you pray to God that you don't get any crazy inflammation or pain. And when you don't, you come back 3 or 4 days later and you do another set, just 1. And then you come back 3 or 4 days later and you're like, wow, that was easy. I didn't even get sore. Then you do 2 sets. And maybe you get a little bit sore, maybe not. And then as your body adapts and you basically err on the side of easy, not crazy soreness, so on and so forth, you're going to expand both the volume and the frequency with proactive deloads often. What does that mean? Proactive deloads are regular kind of deloads that are pre-planned. You know, like every 4th week or some shit, you take a deload. Reactive deloads are ones in which your body's telling you need a deload and then you take one. So here's the thing, reactive deloads are awesome and a great training tool when you're not fucked up. When you're fucked up, your body telling you some shit is way too late. A reactive deload post-surgery is like, fuck, my quad. Oh, fuck, I guess I need a deload. Oops, right? That's too late. Your deload is now 3 months long and maybe requires additional surgery. So what is a proactive deload in this context? It means that when you're up to like 5 sets of 30 leg extensions, 3 times a week, and you're feeling pretty good, you're kind of feeling your swag a little bit, pause, take a couple of sessions, super deload, right? Just do like 2 sets of 10 leg extensions, same weight, right? And, or, you know, body weight squat or whatever you're doing. And just for 2 sessions, do 2 sets of 10. Super easy. And you're like, this is bullshit, but great. You're really recovering, and then start working back into the volume, back into the frequency, and so on and so forth. So hopefully that makes sense. So you're going to deload when you don't feel like it. I would say every post-surgery, I think every 3 to 4 weeks of deloading, even when the weights are super easy, I think is a good thing, because you're still active, so on and so forth. It gives you a ton of really good benefits, but it really plays on the safe side. Is deloading from such an easy program every 3 or 4 weeks playing it safe? Of course. Folks, that's the fucking point of phase 2, is to play it safe, right? That's when you want to play it safe, not when you're at your all-time best and you're coming up to a meet. That's when you don't play it safe. You play it safe here. And there it says expanding the range of motion as possible. What does that mean? If you have a comfortable range of motion, you start there. Maybe in a leg extension machine, you know, you can only bend the leg maybe 45 degrees when it starts, which fucking sucks, but it's the cards you were dealt. If it doesn't hurt or feel really weird, maybe a couple sessions later, you can try 50 degrees or 55 degrees or 60 degrees. And you don't have to fucking count the degrees. Just go as deep as you can until you're like, ooh, okay, I don't know, this kind of feels weird. And then maybe the next time or 2 sessions later, I would say 2 sessions at a time, because you never want to rush the process, you go a little deeper. By the end of a month or 2 of this shit, you're going through a full range of motion, be it in body weight squats, leg presses, leg extensions, what have you, still super light, super easy. And all of a sudden, you're going through a full range of motion, which is really awesome. A big part of this is to go through that full range of motion, because you're eventually going to go full ROM anyway, and you have to get all of your tissues nice and strong, and it helps work a lot of that scar tissue out. So when can we move on? When do we know that this phase is over? There's really no distinct time scale, but here's the deal. When we can train a full range of motion, or close to it, with no pain, and when the occlusion training or the high rep training is at high volumes and frequencies, and it no longer causes meaningful pumps or soreness, right? So basically when you're doing like 6 sets of 30, 3 days a week with leg extensions or body weight squats or something like that, you're like, I just feel like I'm just like an endurance athlete. I'm just doing work. People are like, oh man, that's a huge workout. Did you get a pump? You're like, nope, didn't feel a fucking thing. Did you get sore? No, not really. Right? That means your muscles are really well conditioned again, which is good. They'll need to be for the future training. That means you're getting a lot of blood flow to the area. The vascularization is really good. And you're in a really, really good spot, right? So only when you're at this spot are you really done with the process. And for sure, when you can train at pretty much a full range of motion, right? You're not going to go back and load 405 pounds on your back for squats if you're like, yeah, I can't go below this point because it still feels weird. Like, well, you just didn't do your phase 2 well enough. Usually it takes a month or more. Notice that last phase took about a month. This phase takes a month. We're in it for the long haul. And like I said, patience is a big part of this because most people just don't have time for this shit. The thing is, you didn't choose to get hurt, right? Well, maybe you did if you're a really dumb asshole. You're like, I'm going to try squat 900 and my best is 700. Then you really did choose to get hurt. But you know, you didn't choose the injury, it chose you. Those are the cards you were dealt. You know, if I had a fucking way or a magic pill for you to be able to just do this in 1 month, I would fucking tell you, this is not an exercise in like patience, like for ego, like you're a fucking man, you're a lion, you're not a sheep, you need to be patient. A fucking lion is patient for his prey. Fuck that dumb shit. I fucking hate being patient. I want my shit now. The thing is, there's no rush in this process. It's just messenger of bad news here. Phase 3. Conventional volume buildup. So let's take a look and let's sort of gather our cards and look at them here. What's going on with our body when we enter phase 3? So in other words, after phase 2, right? Here's what's going on. You can do most normal exercises for the muscle group with no discomfort at 30 RM weights or so. So if someone loads your 30 RM in a leg press, which, you know, who knows, it might be like 135 or 225 or even 315 or some shit. You can do them with no discomfort. Now, if you're not super sure you can go heavier than that, good, you shouldn't have been going heavier, but there's no weird discomfort or no weird ROM limitation. So you're kind of like, oh, this feels pretty good. Notice, remember I said last time phase 3 is when most people kind of fuck this shit up? A lot of people will just skip right to phase 3 and they'll skip phase 4 too, because this is the first time you feel relatively normal. You're not fucking like hobbling around, you're walking normally. You're not just doing leg extensions. You might be doing bodyweight squats, and you're not feeling any discomfort. A lot of people will be like, yes, let's fucking just do sets of 5. Wrong. Like, really, really bad idea. Because your shit is not completely healed yet, especially from a connective tissue perspective. So the goal of this phase is to continue to build muscle and accelerate neural and architectural adaptations to heavier weights. So this is going to be our first introduction to heavier weights and legit volumes from those heavy weights, which have a very different effect on tissue than super, super lightweight training. So what are the modalities and methods? Well, conventional exercises, right? A lot of machines can help with lower body work just because they can stabilize a lot of your other shit. Upper body work, it can be machines, free weights. It can even be mostly free weights of conventional exercise. And a lot of times it helps you get back your balance and everything. You're going to be working a lot in the 20 rep range. 2 to 4 reps shy of failure. Notice you're not going to failure. Going to failure really early is a real good way to re-injure yourself. Notice this is 20 rep range. This is why it says lots of machines can help, because like, fuck doing 20 rep squats, you know? At that point, you're not even training your legs, you're training like your lungs and your fucking ass and who knows, your abs or some shit, your mind, right? So a lot of times hack squats and leg presses and maybe in some extensions can help. And 20 rep range, 2 to 4 reps shy of failure. Notice, like, you know, if you're working in your 20 rep range, 2 to 4 reps shy of failure, that's a fucking meat and potato set right there. Right, like that's fucking hard, and that builds a shitload of muscle. That's like kind of describing a lot of bodybuilding and training at this point. You're going to start with lower volumes because remember, you're not used to volumes. Basically, don't start with 6 sets of everything 3 times a week. Start with 2 sets of everything and work up. Don't worry, right? The weights are now less light, so it's going to be a bit of a shock to start with weights that are quote unquote this heavy. Now, they're going to feel heavy to your body, even though they don't feel heavy to your mind. Start with lower volume, slowly working up to close to your MRV, maximum recoverable volume, right? Definitely you don't want to like hit it and bounce off, but you slowly work up to close to your MRV where basically like it's getting really hard to maintain your performance because the volume's so high. Deload and repeat. And you're going to increase weights just enough to keep the first sets shy of 25 reps. So you're not increasing the weights so much that your reps are falling week to week to week. You're increasing them enough so that your reps don't fall. Or in other words, so that you're increasing enough so that your reps don't rise, right? Because if you just do the same weight over and over, you're going to get more and more and more reps with it. We're actually trying to transition a little bit more into the heavy stuff now, and part of that is you know, getting tendons stronger, so on and so forth. And eventually, this is part of the transition back to heavy strength sport. So you're going to want to put weight on the bar. Now, the good news is, as soon as you start working in this range, you're going to develop so much muscle hypertrophy, and your neural adaptations are going to return so quickly that you can actually start to increase weights pretty well. Now, what's too fast is when your reps start dropping. But as long as you're in that 20 rep range, you can increase weights, and sometimes you'll be able to increase by 5 pounds a week, 10 pounds a week, so on and so forth. Notice, let me go back to something here. There is no mention of increasing weights here at all. right? Here, you might increase weights only if you got so much stronger so quick that your 30-ish reps are starting to be 50-ish reps if they're 4-rep shot failure, right? So here you mostly increase volume by increasing set numbers and increasing frequency. Here, you're actually starting to increase weight as well as volume, and you're already at a normal frequency. When can you move on? Well, in this example, your imaging, you go and get some kind of scan done for your leg. It confirms the tendon is healed near fully or several months after starting this phase. This phase lasts a long time, several months. That's like at least 2 months, as far as I know what the term several means. That means it's going to suck. You're going to be sucking a whole lot of dick during this phase because you are going to be in fucking agony. This kind of training blows. That's why most powerlifters are not bodybuilders, because bodybuilding training is fucking hard, right? A bunch of sets in the 20s. Oh my sweet Lord, tons of different exercises. Cool, you're going to get much bigger. You're probably going to regain almost all of your size, if not more than you've ever had, which is really the silver lining here. But it's going to take a couple of months. And by then, here's the cool thing, your 20 rep maxes or 25 rep max is going to be getting up there, man. It's going to be getting some pretty impressive weight, even if it's on assistance move like leg press, so on and so forth. The gold standard here, not everyone does this, is to actually go get the doctor to inspect you, preferably with imaging, and be like, yeah, you know what, we actually can't tell this tendon apart from anything that's never been broken. That's really good news. That's when you're ready for phase 4. Phase 4, it's called intensification to 8s. What the hell does that mean? So in phase 4 or after phase 3, here's what our reality is. Tissue healing from the injury is either complete or very nearly complete. But the problem is you haven't lifted anything remotely heavy for the last couple of months. Sets of 20 is not heavy, right? So the goal of this phase is to continue to build muscle, which is really good. It's going to serve you really well, but slowly work down to doing heavy sets of 8 to prepare you for true strength training to resume again. So this is phase 4 is basically like a transitional phase. To be completely honest, phase 3 pretty much took care of almost everything as far as the injury is concerned. Phase 4, this is like when a doctor can legitimately tell you, hey, you're cleared for your sport. But you're not really cleared for your sport because you're not going to go from sets of 20 to sets of 2 unless you want just really, really poor strength transfer and needless risk of potential re-injury, although that's pretty low at this point. It's a transitional phase to get you back into powerlifting, into weightlifting shape. So what are you going to do? You're going to do a mesocycle, right, 4 to 6 weeks or something of 15 to 20 rep sets. You're going to do a mesocycle of 12 to 16 reps, and maybe you're going to do a mesocycle of 8 to 12 reps, and then at the end, you're going to do a meso of about 8 reps. Now, mind you, you're going to go up in weight during each one of these mesos as the repetitions and reserve falls, and you're going to go up in weight between these mesos as well, right? So there's going to be quite a bit of weight jumps. Remember that thing you wanted to do post-injury was put some fucking weight back on your back? Here you are. You're fucking welcome. So you're going to be making huge strides in weight on the bar. It's just going to be feeling pretty different week to week to week. Good news is you're pretty much fucking healed at this point, so you can handle it. When can you move on from this phase? Well, when you're down to 8s, right? And everything feels like you were never injured to begin with, or close, or as close as the doctor says. The doctor says, well, you're never gonna, that knee's always gonna feel weird, but you're good to go, I promise you, you're fine, right? Ideally, it's like you never injured to begin with, and here's the fucking awesome thing. You're doing fucking heavy 8s, man. Heavy 8s is a fucking stone's throws away from 5s, 3s, and everything else powerlifting and weightlifting related. Here's a really good sort of side benefit of this. When you're doing a ton of these reps and a ton of this volume, this is a great time to brush up on your technique, right? This is a great time. Clearly you're going to be building a shitload of muscle. If you do this properly, I'm going to make you a fucking promise. If you do this properly, you will be way more muscular after surgery than you were before, after injury than you were before. That's a hell of a side benefit. And it's not just a side benefit because you're going to take that muscle after you do 8s and you're going to go back into powerlifting training or weightlifting training, and you're going to do 5s, 3s, and 2s or whatever, and singles, and you're going to hit all-time PRs. Because with that much muscle gain to this shit, you're going to have to. Plain and simple, right? Great time to work on technique because, look, none of us really like to brush up our technique when it means taking weight off the bar. So you're in a fucking strength phase doing 5s and 3s. Someone's like, drop fucking weight off the bar. You got to fucking arch your back bar. You're like, God damn it, I'm trying to get strong. But look, when you're doing sets of 15, sets of 12, 6, 8, shit like that, this is a great time to work on perfecting your technique because none of these are ego weights anyway. Who gives a shit what you do for 15s or 20s or 16s or some shit, right? Great time to work on technique. So basically, you're more muscular than ever. Your technique has improved more than ever. This is really, really good stuff. So at this point, we got some really good stuff going on. At this point, we are entering into, not even a phase. At this point, we get into unrestricted training, right? And because we're in unrestricted training, this is kind of the sort of end of the talk, because unrestricted training means that, you know, we don't really have anything left to teach you. You guys already know how to do powerlifting training, or, you know, that's really not even the point of the talk. So the cool thing is about this unrestricted training thing is at the end of phase 4, what were you doing? Well, you were doing heavy 8s, right? Sets of 8 with no problem, right? So you're muscular as fuck, probably more than before you got hurt. And you're healed enough, tendon-wise, structurally-wise, for sets of 5, sets of 3, etc. And because you just finished a block of 8s, you're neurologically, technically, you know, energy systems wise, you're ready for sets of 5, sets of 3. You're ready for regular strength training, general strength to resume. And then after that, that's all you just take over. And here's a really great thing. If you do this right, you don't have to do the toe dip in the pool kind of strength training. You're like, all right, first time doing 5s, I don't know. Like, yeah, if you do this 2 months after your fucking quad tear, it will be a fucking really, really nerve-wracking time, right? But if you do this after a set of, you know, sets of heavy 8s, where you almost certainly hit all-time PRs for 8s, you're going to train normally as hell. You're going to be training better than normally because you're more muscular and stronger than you've ever been before, right? And here's the deal. This process takes months. It really does. Sometimes a year more for very extensive injuries. Look, if you have a full tendon rupture, distal patellar tendon, fuck, man, it could take you a year. It could take you more, right? But I promise it's worth it, because at the end of it, you're better than you ever were. That's a hell of a thing to say about injury. I mean, can you imagine someone who you sort of were keeping in touch with, and then they went to the meet where you got hurt, or they were in the training, they were in the gym when you got hurt, or they talked to you right after surgery. Can you imagine meeting them a year later, and they're, you know, let's say it's like, you know, we all have those people we only see at meets, right? Like, oh, that one guy who trains, you know, the gym 40 minutes away, and I only ever see him twice a year at meets. You see him a year later to meet, and he's like, oh man, are you back to competing? You're like, yep. And he's like, oh man, how you feeling? You're gonna take it easy on squats this meet? You're like, nope, I'm opening with a PR. And they're gonna be like, what the fuck? That's incredible. Like, do you want to be that person, or do you want to be the person who's like, yeah, still taking it easy on squats because, you know, I re-injured my quad halfway through rehab, so on and so forth. I'd come back with more size, and which in short order becomes more strength, so on and so forth. So you can do that, or you can, quote, work up to a heavy triple 2 months out of surgery, get hurt again, and always feel a bit off and not hit PRs for years to come until you actually do this properly, or ever. And guys, I'm not trying to scaremonger here. I got nothing to fucking gain from this. I'm not even a fucking physical therapist. You have a very good chance after a serious injury of doing things improperly and straight up never coming back the same way again, or ever hitting PRs, period. If you play your cards right, you have a chance of it just being a bump in the road and you hit fucking massive PRs. There's a bunch of powerlifters, a bunch of weightlifters, a bunch of all kinds of athletes who have hit these major injuries, and people are like, dude, that guy's done. And then a year and a half, they come in and they PR. 2 years later, they're top of the game again. And you're like, oh my God, how the fuck? That's a fucking thing. That's a legitimate thing. And unfortunately, we all know people who go completely the other way, right? They never fucking hit PRs again, and some of them never even fucking do the motion again. Is that all up to the lifter? No. But a lot of it is based on how you come back after your rehab and including your rehab. Right? So here's a thing to remember. I think this is the last slide, or second to last comment. When you think or say, right, I just want to go heavy again soon, right? When you say that after rehab or during rehab, like, oh, I just fucking want to go heavy, fuck this bullshit. You're not among the first 1 million people to have had this desire. You are not fucking special. It's not unique. It's not wise. Don't fucking do it. Right? It's like, you guys remember being teenagers, or some of you may have teenagers at home, which are my condolences, right? Teenagers have this ridiculous thing when they turn like 13 or 14, They think they have these fucking unique problems that every fucking teenager since the dawn of time has had. Like, nobody understands me. Actually, Bob, that is not a very good teenager name. Derek, there you go. Actually, Derek, actually, Jake. Everybody fucking understands you. You're banal as fuck. Like, you're a fucking trite, just like commonality. Everyone understands you too well. They're tired of your bullshit, right? It can, we all grow up after teenage years, most of us anyway, and go, oh my God, I was so fucking, can't believe I thought that I was like unique for having feelings for a girl the first time, or fucking emotional roller coaster. I fucking hated my dad. Like, welcome to the club. The thing is, after you get hurt, a bunch of people think like, man, I just fucking want to go heavy. Like, whoa, 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 stop, guys, fucking pause. Let's give this motherfucker a slow clap. You were the first person. Everybody else who ever got hurt was just a pussy motherfucker and just quit lifting forever and just didn't have the fucking lion's balls to say some deep shit like, I just want to go heavy. Wow. Hey, you know what? You really belong in a movie 300. Here's your fucking sword. Here's your armor. Go kill some fucking orcs or whatever the fuck they did in that movie. You're the fucking man. No, you're fucking not. JK, you're just a fucking caricature of a fucking idiot lifter. There's tons of them around. If you want to join that crew, sweet, you can get re-injured. Don't do it. It's fucking stupid. Hunker down, do the work, come back better. Patience. You want to be up against someone who's patient, or do you want to be up against someone who does things impulsively? If I had a competitor in the sport of powerlifting, I don't, because I suck and I don't compete anymore. If I had a competitor and I fucking really hated him and I wanted to out-total him, if he got hurt, I'd hope he was the kind of fucking ridiculous asshole that tried to come back too soon. And I would never hope that he's patient and calm and wise and does the right shit and beats my ass later. I think that's all I have to say. Boy, that was emotional, guys. I don't even know what I said. Hopefully I said the right shit.
Dr. Mike, that was quite possibly the most entertaining webinar I've ever been a part of. I gotta know,
boy.
Is it tough being as famous as you are and batting off compliments left, right, and center?
You know what? It's just after a while, they're not even compliments. I feel entitled to them. Like, of course I'm great. How dare you not point that out earlier? I actually get upset that people haven't complimented me earlier when they do message me with adulation.
What's the time limit? Like, is it within the first few sentences, first couple of messages? Where are we talking?
I'm like at a Kanye West kind of time limit where it's already too late, and now you're just wasting my time, so you better get to complimenting me quick.
That's incredible. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here first. All right, so move into the Q&A session. And the first question from, I'm sorry, this is Jeremy. How long until the webinar will be available to listen to again? That's going to be within 5 business days. You should be getting an email with the link to the recording. So, question from Derek. I think that was one of your teenager names that you used, Dr. Mike.
Oops, sorry, Derek.
He submitted the question before you said that, so that was probably before you.
I'm sure he'll be submitting another question to the tune of "fuck you, Dr. Mike."
Probably. So he says, for phase 2, low load range of motion training, what if you have a low back injury? So single joint exercises are easy to do, but compound movements that load the spine like squats and deadlifts are where we run into trouble. Do we still do high rep training, 30 reps or so, for something like squats and deadlifts?
So the joint that was injured is the low back?
He didn't specify that, but he's saying, what if, I'm interpreting this to be like, what if you also happen to have like a low back tweak or something?
Then, okay, so the number one thing in injuries is, unless it's post-surgical or post-recovery and you're in that phase where it doesn't hurt to train it anymore, it just kind of feels weird, the cardinal rule of training an injury is don't do anything that hurts. Right. So like, for example, if you hurt your knee and you're trying to rehab your knee with higher rep squats, but your lower back is something that sort of doesn't like higher rep squats, don't do fucking squats, do lunges, do hacks, do leg extensions, do leg presses, avoid aggravating something else. And actually that brings up a really good point. What you definitely don't want to do is rush back too soon to heavy lifting. And for example, if one of your knees hurts or your quads hurt, you start pressing a shitload off the other leg. And because you walk off the other leg, you sit on the toilet with the other leg, you start to aggravate that other leg, and you can actually get injuries or more like wear and tear, not acute bad ones, from relying too much on a supporting structure. So the number one rule is don't do anything that hurts anything else in your rehab.
Beautiful. So we have a question from, this is Kent. Going in for a biceps tenodesis in 2 weeks, so thanks for this. In case it isn't covered in the presentation, any recommendations on how to eat during each of the phases? Maintenance, slight surplus, slight deficit. Does a big surplus have any advantage other than eating your feelings?
Well, yeah, it actually has a distinct disadvantage. They've done a considerable amount of research on surgery recovery and diet, and they've shown that people who gain a lot of weight after surgeries, and this is a lot of times in the hospital research, so it's very precise, actually undergo lower rates of tissue repair, which is really intense, right? Sort of revelatory. So if you get super fat after surgery, you actually do yourself a disservice. So my recommendation during the surgical procedure, I always get an IV of amino acids and glucose during all my surgeries. So I'm not trying to go fucking catabolic for 4 hours. You guys know what I'm saying? But I actually did, during my umbilical hernia repair, I asked if they could put amino acids into the IV. The doctor laughed at me and then gave me sleeping gas, fucking asshole. I still got to find him in the street. You might be a doctor in that hospital, but you're just another motherfucker in the street, you feel me? That's what I'm going to say to him before I assault him. But in any case, so eat at maintenance during phase 1 and phase 2. During phase 3, the training starts to get pretty hard. And if you're feeling up to it, you might actually generate a slight surplus so you can gain the most amount of muscle. Now, mind you, and I didn't mention this, but you're going to train your upper body after rehab is over. Like during rehab, training your other parts of your body is going to be a little tough because sometimes they don't want you to train hard, and that's always under the doctor's direction, physical therapist direction. They're going to not want you to train super hard because even creating intra-abdominal pressure, rise in blood pressure can damage tissue. But after like sort of starting in phase 2, you can train the other parts of your body pretty fucking hard, no worries. So phase 3 for sure, you can do like a pretty good mass phase. Just take it slow, but you can absolutely start to gain weight at that point, no problem. Up until and including phase 2, I would almost always recommend staying at maintenance. And the good news is you lost so much muscle size from the injury that just staying at maintenance and eating well is going to let you gain weight. It's going to let you gain muscle while losing fat at the same time. Once you're in phase 3, that might not be the case, and then you can go hypercaloric. Or you can, in phase 3, you can even do a slight deficit to get rid of some body fat. At that point, you're pretty much in the clear. But definitely don't fuck with anything, maintenance all the way through phase 2.
Can we look forward to the track, You're Just Another Motherfucker in the Streets, You Feel Me, on your rap album?
You know, the pollsters that actually write my rap music, the industry execs, say that this very polarizing lyrics. But so I'll have to get back to you on that. I wanted that. That was my #1 track in my mixtape. But they're like, look, you got a more corporate image now. You know this fucking bullshit. Fame. Am I right?
You sold out, man. You sold out.
Fuck you. That's my third album. It's called I Sold Out. You know, I sold out, but I'm still in a fucking Lamborghini, right?
That's awesome.
Where are you driving? Exactly.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Please don't hurt me.
No worries.
I'm going to lump in 2 questions here from Aaron and Matthew. They're wondering what phase 4 looks like for weightlifters and if there are any particular considerations for the reintroduction of plyometrics or things like the snatch and clean and jerk.
Yeah, that's a really, really, really great question. So what I would say is for weightlifters, phase 4 starts to be the first time that you get away from purely static movements like presses and squats and pulls, or really, I don't want to say pulls because for some people that's a dynamic motion. Clean style deadlifts, clean grip deadlifts. That's so phase 4 is the first time you might get into, depending on the nature of your injury, some derivatives, especially for reps. So what you might do is you might start doing high pulls for sets of 5. You might start doing block pulls with a triple extension for sets of 5. You might start doing some turning the bar over a little bit, hang high pulls, hang cleans, things like that. Again, they're still sets of 5, maybe cluster sets of 3 for volume. For volume and technical expression, not for max weights, right? During that time, I think for weightlifters, that's totally fine. But, huge but, you got to work with your coach, work with your rehab person to make sure you're not doing something that's a real bad idea. For example, if you hurt your knee, you have an ACL tear, PCL tear, something like that. Depending on the sort of time course of your recovery, the jerk position, like catching jerks, just might not be great for your knee at that point. So they might be like, look, you got another couple of months until you can do that kind of shit. But because your knees aren't out in front of you or behind you in catching a snatch or catching a clean, you might be able to do that. So that at that point, you definitely want to sort of work back with your rehab person and shameless plug, contact some clinical athlete guys and be like, look, here's what's going on with me. Here's my symptoms. Here's the extent of my surgery. Here's where I am with my recovery. I'm strong, I'm muscular again. Can I get under the bar? Can I turn the bar over? Can I do actual split jerks, so on and so forth? They might be of help to you at that point. But on a very conservative side, I would just keep the minimally dynamic lifts in there, derivatives. I would say the full lifts, probably it's not even necessary to do them yet. I would come in to the full lifts after phase 4, right? But the derivatives are a great time to start phase 4. I wouldn't start the derivatives any earlier than that. So if you're like doing drop snatches in phase 3, you're asking for a real bad deal.
Thanks for making the shameless plug for me so I don't have to feel like a scumbag as I do it.
That's it, man. Well, you know, I feel like a scumbag just daily. So it's not even it's a pertinent point.
It's not a big deal. Yeah, it's just life.
Boom. Just another day.
Kelly wants to know, what pain threshold do you think is tolerable to allow progression into phase 2 and any amount of loading, in particular when there's been significant nerve trauma, given it's been well over 1 month post-surgery?
Well, so 1 month post-surgery doesn't mean a whole lot depending on the nature of the surgery, right? I think a lot of people have this idea that a month post-surgery I should be just fine. This is by no means clear. The amount of pain you should be able to tolerate in phase 2, nothing riveting, is a really good general constraint. The pain should feel relatively peripheral, kind of like, ooh, moving into this range of motion feels kind of strange and pulls on some stuff, but it shouldn't be like a deep stabbing pain. That's when you know you're probably doing some shit that's wrong. By phase 2, your swelling should have gone down enough that you don't have any pain secondary to trying to move something that is very highly inflamed. But I will say this, a real good time to contact your surgeon and your physical therapist and get their wisdom on exactly what kind and what nature of pain is okay and what's not okay. So for example, if you have, a surgical repair in your quad and they attach the tendon sort of below your knee, right, distal patellar tendon, sharp pain in that area means stop. But if your knees kind of feel a little weird, like deep inside your knee or in the posterior area of your knee, just because you haven't used the shit in a while, you're going to tell your surgeon that, and he's going to be like, that's totally fine. There's no damage to that area. It's just like, some scar tissue, got some fluid buildup, you're totally cool. So it really is a very specific question, but I will say the true answer is probably not much pain. If you're still in a ton of pain, pushing it with very high reps is just probably fucking up some structures continually.
For sure. And maybe I'll just jump in and speak
Please.
to what I often talk about with patients in that sort of situation. I think you summed it up really well in saying that it really depends on the situation. That's kind of a cop-out answer, but it's true. It depends on what we're talking about. And I used to use something like a numeric pain rating scale just to try to give people a cutoff point. But the inherent issue with that is that my definition of 5 is probably inherently different from someone else's definition of 5. And their definition is probably different from the next patient, so on and so forth. So the spiel that I kind of like right now, that still is kind of vague, but is probably the most accurate, is that we want everything to stay very, very tolerable, and that it doesn't take them out of commission for hours or the rest of the day or into the next day or like multiple days. Some sort of elevated symptoms that's normal to a certain extent, but again, has to be tolerable. And we're looking often to have things kind of alleviate by maybe 24 hours after the fact. What do you think about that? Do you think that is in line with what you were thinking?
Yeah, I think that's super great. The only sort of caveat I draw to that is a lot of it depends on where the pain is and the nature of the pain. And that answers the question of, are you causing damage, or is this just a price to pay for trying to get through a full range of motion and do rehab? Because if it's the latter, 24 hours of pain is not unusual. If it's the former, an hour of pain, a second of pain means stop. You're doing something really bad. Because a lot of people, it's almost like when you coach regular people that are uninjured and they're just the first time training, they're like, oh my God, I'm in pain. You're like, that's lactic acid. That's just, you're just going to have to accept that, right?
Yeah.
Versus like, I'm in pain, like I feel it right here in my knee. Then as a personal trainer, you know, like, oh, okay, we're going to stop. That's not good. So when, and again, this is the same as your answer is it really depends. When you're feeling pain, the nature of the pain has to be addressed. So for example, I say this person mentioned nerve damage, certain kinds of nerve damage. You just do some range of motion, the shit's just going to fucking feel weird and it's going to hurt. And you're going to go back to the surgeon and he's going to be like, that's going to be the rest of your life. So, of course, you don't stop when that particular area is hurting. But if the area that was surgically operated on is hurting, so on and so forth, that could be a time to really reevaluate some things.
For sure. Totally agree with that. That's an excellent caveat to throw in there. Austin wants to know, DJ Mike, would it matter when you start the 4 phases of rehab, of the comeback plan, even if the surgery was a year or more ago? So maybe let me modify the question. Instead of would it matter, can we ask how would the comeback plan look different, if at all?
Jeez. Well, so it might look different in the fact that you might have some range of motion back, hopefully. I'll put it to you this way. Hope to God you did phase 1. I'm not sure how you can go a year after surgery without ever having done rehab. If you didn't do phase 1, you might try phase 1 first, but you might get through it in like 2 weeks to where you have full range of motion. And so basically like the injury is completely healed already because it's been a fucking year, but your muscles are in total disuse, so on and so forth. After that, you would go through all the phases. It just might take you like 3 or 4 weeks of each phase as opposed to 8 weeks in each phase. That you still have to reintroduce super slowly because other structures around there have weakened considerably. The muscle size is down considerably. And to be honest, after a year of disuse post-surgery, not going through all the formal phases, you can't really be too sure that you did get full recovery of all function and all structure. So I would say still go through all the phases, but you might get to a point where you hit the landmark. So for example, for phase 2, it says, when can we move on? We can train with a full range of motion with no real serious pain, and when occlusion and high rep training at high volumes just don't want to do anything. Well, if that occurs after 3 weeks, because you already had a year of recovery, then 3 weeks later, you're good to go, right? But if it takes 6 weeks, then you got to do what you got to do. So basically, this is kind of because we have these landmarks, right? The when can we move on criteria, it's almost an auto-regulating process, which is a really cool part. And hopefully these folks get to keep these slides. Oh yeah, they get the presentation available after 5 days, right?
That's right.
So you guys will have these slides and you can go through this. And the good thing about the slides is that like the bottom things that says, when can we move on? It's an auto-regulated process. So for some people, it's going to be after 2 weeks. And then after 6 weeks, it's going to be like they never fucking had a surgery. And for other people, it's going to be 2 years, right? So if you start the process way late, it's probably just going to auto-regulate itself to go faster, but don't push it past the landmarks that were sort of explained. So if you can answer when can we move on in the affirmative for sure, then you can move on. But if you can't, you can't.
Beautiful. Matthew wants to know, what does a lower back progression look like? What are your thoughts on higher rep lumbar flexion and extension-based exercises?
Jeez, boy, I can't answer this question terribly well. Because there's so many injuries that can occur to your lower back. So did you tear a spinal erector? Very rare. Did you have something go wrong with your hip? The posterior aspect of your hip? Was it a disc herniation? Did you have a cracked vertebrae? There's about 10,000 things that can happen wrong with your back, specifically your lower back. So what is contraindicated and what is recommended varies considerably. So for example, if you have a posterior herniation, any kind of spinal flexion very soon after surgery is just a real fucking bad idea, right? That's when they're going to teach you to tie your shoes by squatting down completely vertically, so on and so forth. Right? On the other hand, if you had a fractured vertebra, as long as you don't vertically or twist-wise load it a ton, you can absolutely help it heal by doing a range of motions that include a large degree of spinal flexion for repetitions and a large degree of spinal extension, so long as it doesn't aggravate that site. So it really, really, really depends on the nature of the injury. And if you want to add anything to that, I'd be more than happy, I think.
Yeah, I'd be saying something along the same lines. I'd have having a hard time thinking of a situation where I would really want to have someone do a shit ton of repetitive flexion and extension exercises. Now, that's not to say that flexion and extension exercises are bad. Quite the opposite. Often we get people coming into the clinic, and this is, mind you, not in a post-op situation, who have some sort of back pain or back-related symptom, and some repeated movements, which might include flexion, extension, side bending, rotation, or some combination of all of them. That's a great thing. That's often where we start to try to desensitize the currently sensitive movements or positions, and to try to build up some more confidence, because we know that pain is complicated shit, and that it depends a lot on things like what we believe about the current state of the body. Do we think we're damaged? Do we think we're kind of fucked? That sort of thing. So I use them personally. I'm just having a tough time thinking about a situation in which I'd want to regiment some high rep back extensions, or something like high rep sit-ups or Jefferson curls. Like it would take a really, really unique situation with really rock solid clinical reasoning on my end to make me consider that. So yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It may not be, the rehab may not end up looking a lot like that with repetitive flexion extension, but it would, in fact, look a lot like what Dr. Mike has been talking about.
Yeah, and also just so once the back is relatively stable and the flexion and extension sort of have been established as you can do them with good ROM. Again, to reflect what you said, it wouldn't be where you just do 30 reps of crunches and 30 reps of like arch your back extensions. It could be that you start sort of deadlift progression, or you start doing some planks to strengthen the area around in a variety of other ways that is not direct spinal flexion extension, and that's how you build a progression into phase 2, 3, and 4. But again, it's a super, the back is a real, like, Jesus, what happened, right, is really the big question.
For sure. Kent wanted to know, will the slide deck be made available to us as well as the recording for quicker reference? Potentially. Dr. Mike, would you be comfortable sending on your slide deck? Okay, sweet. So we'll see what we can do about that. Great question there. All right, well, that brings us towards the end of what we've got stored up in the question bank. So, Dr. Mike, when you're not making super sweet rap mixtapes and getting shot down by big, the studio for what you think is
fucking assholes.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
They don't understand true art, is what I'm saying.
I feel you, man. Might have to go with an independent label, but I mean, that Lamborghini don't pay for itself.
Damn it.
So when you're not doing all that and doing sciencey stuff, or maybe doing sciencey stuff, what keeps you busy?
Well, so I'm the chief sports scientist at Renaissance Periodization, that nice little logo in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and I write books. I'm actually endeavoring to write our Scientific Principles of Hypertrophy Training book, which will be really cool. Written already available. I'm sure some of you guys have read the Scientific Principles of Strength Training book. We wrote that years ago, and it's been kind of a good book for us. I do some video lectures for our members only area, RP Plus. I travel around the world where I am ridiculed, tomatoes are thrown at me, and occasionally give a decent lecture. And what the fuck else do I do? I train in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu a lot, and I do a shitload of bodybuilding training. So I'm either tired from training and working on digital products for RP or writing books, or I'm spending time with my wife, or I'm crying alone a lot. A lot of the latter, much more of the latter than any of the things I mentioned.
So when you've got your hitters on the streets, taking out your enemies, are they taking them out in BJJ style?
My posse doesn't know any BJJ because I don't want these motherfuckers thinking they can challenge your boy.
Right.
I'm the king. You don't know shit. They mostly just sheer. My crew is just straight violent. They don't know. They don't even know how to express their violence. Mostly, if you Google hardcore dance, where the guys will dance by like hitting the ground with their feet and punching the air, that's how we fight in my hood.
That's how they do it, eh? Yeah, that's a pretty smart move. Making sure that they don't know all that you know.
Yeah, I don't want to be fucking competitors, right? Because that's how E2 Brute. That's how these motherfuckers stab you in the back, as you give them too much power. You need to give them a fucking taste, but just a taste. That's it.
I believe the philosopher Omar Little on The Wire once said, "You come with the king, you best not miss."
Dude, a wise man, a very wise man.
That's what I'm saying. All right. Well, with that, we'll bring it in for a landing. Dr. Mike, on behalf of everyone at Clinical Athlete and behalf of everybody who has joined us tonight or will join us in the future, thank you so much for working with us to put together not just this webinar, but also the podcast episode that came up before this, and just learning us something real good.
Well, thanks for putting up with my bullshit. Thank you so much for having me. Mixtape drops soon. I'll see you motherfuckers in the streets.
Peace.
Peace.
And on that note, so stay tuned for upcoming Clinical Athlete events. We've got next month's webinar with Adam Meekins, which should be another fantastic one. And it might rival Dr. Mike's for profanity, so stay tuned for that.
Oh, boy.
It'll be great. I'm really looking forward to that one, too. Quinn is in Houston, Texas this weekend for the Clinical Athlete Weightlifting Certification course. So keep your eyes on the website for upcoming course dates for that. As always, we're all ears to hear about how we can serve you better, what you want to be seeing. So feel free to shoot us emails. Shoot me an email personally. My email is Jared, Jared, @clinicalathlete.com. I'll be more than happy to hear from you. Tell me about how much you're looking forward to Dr. Mike's mixtape, and we'll fanboy about that together. And on that note, thank you all once again. I'll catch you on the next one.